Also joining us, Walt Hackney of Schooler Hackney Ag Associates. Walt's also seen regularly on Market to Market, as is our senior Market to Market analyst, John Roach of Roach Ag Marketing. John, thank you very much for joining us. Thank all of our panel members for being with us tonight. 1998 was a tough year for Iowa agriculture. No question about it. Hog prices 7-8 cents. Cattle prices have been under pressure for really the last 24 months. And you add all those things together and it spells problems. So let's talk a little bit about 1998, but what's ahead for 1999? Let's start with our senior market analyst from Market to Market, John Roach. John, as you look ahead, with a quick recap of 1998, as you look ahead, what's in the forecast?
Well, we have a surplus supply of grains, really of all the grains, corn, wheat, and beans, and we're going to likely add to those surpluses unless we have a problem with nature. And in the livestock business, it looks like we've come out of the worst of our problems, and they're now off onto a better outlook for 1999 than we had in 1998, but we still have lots and lots of protein that we're going to have to move through the system.
Okay, so certainly no quick recovery. Walt Hackney is also with us on the panel, one of our regular livestock analysts. And Walt, as you look ahead specifically in the livestock sector, what are you seeing? 1998, we talked about liquidation of the hog herd. We saw some evidence of that in the final quarter of 1998 Hogs and Pigs report. How much of that has continued? What's your outlook for prices?
As far as the outlook goes on the hog side, we're expecting to see some lightening of the inventory, particularly through the third quarter. We believe that the fourth quarter will be somewhat of a disappointment considering some of the predictions. We do not believe we're going to have the hole or the market shortage of market hogs that might be predictable for that area. We think there's been more sows retained. We believe the gilt barrel ratio in the plants have created a kept for breeding type thing that isn't in the pig crop report. As far as the cattle go, we do believe that we've floored this market now. We believe that we're not as optimistic as $70 fat cattle going into May, but we do believe that 65 to 68 is an applicable figure for us to work with through the balance of the summer. As far as feeder cattle go, we believe the inventory report. We think the 2% prediction reduction was a little overly aggressive, a little overly optimistic. We saw in our own business a lot of heifer cattle kept back in the ranch community this past fall. So we think the 1% less in the total cattle herd is probably an accurate figure.
Wayne Newton is president of the Benton Eastern Iowa Farm Feeders Cooperative. He started that organization, really a way to add value to the Iowa grain crop by reviving cattle feeding, particularly over in eastern Iowa and elsewhere around the state. Wayne, as you look ahead, your involvement not only includes the Benton Eastern Iowa Farmer Feeders, you're also involved in ethanol production. Give us your outlook for the state of Iowa and for Iowa agriculture for 1999.
Well, Mark, I'm extremely pleased that particularly people in politics see the benefit of adding value to the raw grain. It's essential that we find as many ways to process it as possible and take it around the world in another form other than raw grain. And so that emphasis needs to be held at very high pitch, and I hope this session of the legislature will continue to look at those programs, add to those programs, build on those programs, because we need to make as many products out of that as we possibly can, find new products and so on. We've got another thing on the horizon, and that's the passage of the bill that would make all the unleaded gasoline at a 3.5% oxygenated fuel level. And if the legislature will pass that, that's 100 million gallons of new ethanol production, which would create a lot of potential for more plants like ours.
Kind of describe your plant a little bit, Wayne. And
well, we're a 5.5 million gallon plant that'll use about 2 million bushels of corn per year, and we're building a 5,000 head feedlot next to it in order to use the co-product off of that plant. It'll turn about 8 million in revenue per year, employ about 13 people, and probably add up to 50 to 70 cents per bushel to the value of the corn to the owners of the plant.
It's quite a project, and I know you've been working on it for some time, and it must be glad to see it now really starting to take shape.
That's for sure, Mark. We started this in '95, and it's been a long road, but at this stage of the game, a lot of laws have been changed. There's a lot of programs have been added. The federal incentives have been extended, and so the next plants won't take near the time that we've spent developing this program.
All right. Hank Werman is from Wayne's neighborhood, first vice president over at the bank at Belle Plaine, and one of the big concerns in the last quarter of 1998 was what's the future of the hog business, the independent producer out there, after disastrous prices, worst prices in history. What's ahead for the pork producer as well as the cattlemen? You loan money to these people. Hank, what's your attitude?
To answer that question, yes, we loan money to these people. And let's go back and talk a little bit about 1998. All of the things you talked about as far as the market problems with grain and livestock translated in most cases to some pretty sizable equity losses to a lot of operations. Then we try to look at what we can do as far as 1999. Is there credit available from lenders for agriculture? Yes, there is. What does it take to get it? People have to put together a business plan. They have to examine their costs. They have to do an excellent job of asset management and market management. What does this mean? It really means that each individual operation needs to take a look at where they're at, and the lenders, it's hard to make a blanket statement because each operation usually has a unique set of figures. But certainly there is debt restructure available. We hear a lot about the FSA program, the Guaranteed Loan Program. That's certainly a tool. However, more loans many times is not just the answer. It's going through the entire operation and analyzing it and trying to put together a business plan that's profitable. A lot of times that means working with the rest of these fellows here so that they can do some market management and asset management so that they can be looking at least covering their costs. So that's what we talk about.
All right, we'll come back. We'll talk more about debt restructuring, I'm sure, and I know we'll have some questions on that as well. Let's bring in Dennis Daggett now, someone who's trying to reduce risk in agriculture. He's Chief Operating Officer of IGF Insurance. And Dennis, there's been a lot of products out there. There's been a lot of products brought out under Freedom to Farm, government-subsidized crop protection programs and income protection programs. Talk about what's available coming up in 1999 and what kind of response are you seeing from the farm community?
Well, what's coming up in 1999 is very interesting in the fact that the government this past year, of course, passed the disaster bill. And with that, set aside $400 million additional monies to subsidize crop insurance and to subsidize an additional subsidy for farmers to actually buy up in coverage levels. And what we are seeing is there's a high degree of interest in the crop revenue coverages where basically the programs are setting out there to guarantee a gross income or set a minimum on income off the acre of corn or soybeans. We see a lot of emphasis coming up this year of actually developing a risk management program using crop insurance to actually aid in the marketing of the programs or of the products out there and to actually help the farmer actually partner up with him in establishing some real floors, production floors, price floors for him so that he can go out and effectively develop a marketing program that helps him return some money to the bottom line.
You bet, and ease the mind certainly of the people like Hank over here, those lenders, as well as hopefully bring the groceries home for that farm couple. Virgil Robinson is one of our regular market analysts on Market to Market. Virgil, we turn to you. It seems like a lot for technical advice on what you see happening crop-wise. Fill us in. What do you see out there, corn and soybeans? John mentioned the tremendous supply we have out there of both crops. What can happen in 1999, and how should farmers structure their marketing plan?
Well, I think it's important to mention, Mark, that as we visit tonight, markets reside or are very near their contract lows. And I think the markets have taken into consideration the aforementioned comments of John in that supplies are very adequate at present, and the prospects of adding to current supplies is very strong based on the thoughts that we'll plant probably something near 80 million acres of corn here in the U.S. this spring, and most likely something near 72.5 million acres of beans. Now, if both yield at trend line, and given current projections for disappearance, we are clearly going to add to supplies here in the United States and most likely in the globe. So price prospects, as we visit tonight, are not particularly bright under that scenario. But I think it should also be noted that the market has, I think, taken into account the aforementioned discussion we've had here about supply and the prospect of adding to supply, and it is currently only February. We've yet to plant this crop and grow this crop. So clearly through that window of time, there will be some opportunities and there will be some price improvement. To add to that prospect, I think we should note that based on last week's USDA commitment of traders report, Mark, the speculative community is noticeably and heavily short, particularly wheat, soybeans, soybean products, and corn, pretty much in that order. Any perceived scare or genuine scare, I think, would expedite recovery in the futures market. Given that type of opportunity, I think it's important for our producers to then make some decisions. And it might be selling or forward contracting new crop grain and adding with that CRC, which Dennis could address here at some point in the discussion, or clearly using options to create price floors. I think those opportunities will present themselves, Mark, through the course of the next several weeks, but I think imperatively tonight we need to make mention, or we need to emphasize the fact producers need to be prepared. The comment from Hank regarding a business plan or a strategy, I think, is quite appropriate under these circumstances.
The basics still remain the basics. You have to know what your costs are, what it takes for you to do business and do so profitably. This is your program. Feel free to give us a call. Our operators are standing by at 1-800-469-2788. If you have a question regarding crop insurance, if you have a question regarding the outlook, here's your chance to get some answers. Walt Hackney, this one's coming in specifically for you. It's from a cow-calf producer talking about owning cattle for the year 2000. Would you hold on to those calves and hold them? Can you make them work?
I don't like the intention of the word holding. That always kind of frightens us in the business where we're trying to have a controlled environment or a little bit of inventory control that's somewhat predictable. If the caller is interested in knowing our opinion of the prospects of the markets in the year 2000, I think the cow-calf operations will be in the driver's seat as far as markets go. I think back again to what Hank said, that cow-calf operation, maybe more than we've seen for years, must have his cost of production worked out. He must know that a 90-cent calf at $5.50 this next fall is a profitable venture for him. He must know that as we get into 2000, that shortage of 1% in the national herd should drive the price of ranch calves to a level that should be very profitable. All I think I'm saying here to the caller is I would discourage retained ownership. I think that his opportunity is to get in, get the calf on the ground, get it summered, get it weaned, and get it sold. Because it would appear that his maximum ROI would be in selling those calves off, and I think the market will be an excellent return for him.
All right, now let's go over to a longtime cattle feeder. Wayne, what about that? Do you go along with Walt's advice, or you've preached retained ownership for a long time?
And I really think that it depends on the individual circumstances. If the cash flow requires turning that calf in the year that it's born, that's fine. But we're on the side of the cycle at this point where time is money. And I think we'll see some benefits. Now, if corn's going to remain now at these levels, and if we give 90 cents for the calves, obviously we got to see finished cattle in the 70s someplace, and we're in the cycle where that can occur. If this were 94, 95, when we're still headed down in the 10-year cycle, I would probably say something different. But we've turned the bottom. The last week is, as Walt has pointed out, is pretty positive. And so I think just have to stay tuned and watch if, in fact, we are in an uptrend, and make a decision based on one's cash flow. And once again, time is money when you're in an uptrend.
Hank, you're going to be lending money here to this producer. What are you going to tell him?
I would say that he better analyze his cash needs and his financial position, because to be able to carry those calves off of that cow through the feeding period, you've either got to be able to afford to take that risk or be able to go to the market and minimize that risk.
The next, just as a follow-up to that, our next question comes from Illinois, and of course that toll-free number is available to you folks out there. 800-469-2788. The operators are standing by. From Illinois, this is a question to the entire panel. When will the turnaround happen for grain? And I know that's an almost impossible question to answer at this stage of the game, John Roach, but we've been asking you impossible questions for over 20 years, so give it a shot.
Well, the grain market typically bottoms during this time frame anywhere. We could have bottomed, if you look at a monthly chart, we certainly could have bottomed corn in December. We have not yet taken out the December lows. In the beans, of course, if we bottomed them, we just did it this week. The upward thrust will begin when we start to have less worry about the currency relationship with Brazil. That's been the major problem we've had in the soybean complex, the tremendous devaluation of the Brazilian real. Earlier this week, the beginning of this week, it was down 41% compared to the U.S. dollar in a little over a 2-week period, and that means that they're able to sell their products cheaper and still pay off all their bills at home. So we've got to see some stabilization there, or we've got to see weather worries in South America or weather worries in this country, and clearly it's too early for weather worries in this country. So we probably slug it out here for another 30 to 60 days, but frequently we have good markets moving into April, and we like to make sales in April, May, and June. And I don't know where those prices will be, because we don't know exactly what will be stimulating the market during that time. Presumably some weather worries. The La Nina continues to intensify, and that frequently is associated with reduced crops in the Midwest. So the market will need to put some weather premium in. The key will be to use some overbought indicator. Now we happen to like slow stochastics. Other people like the RSI, Relative Strength Index, and there's some other overbought indicators. The key will be during periods where the market is overbought to be a willing seller of the old crop inventory, and at the same time to be contracting percentages of the new crop, or at the very least to be buying some put insurance on the new crop. And if you remember, there was research done by Iowa State University and the University of Nebraska on the best marketing plan, and it had people purchasing put options during May on both soybeans and corn. So we have some very specific kind of ways of doing a better job of marketing, but farmers many times don't spend enough time trying to learn what the research really says.
All right. So with that, I want you to follow up that with Virgil and your comments earlier regarding flexibility in the marketing plan.
Well, I think they're appropriate under current circumstances, and of course Hank has alluded to that earlier, being our financier on panel tonight. I think in the same context as John was alluding to here a moment ago, Mark, before we can talk about a turnaround in this market, I think it's important producers realize the magnitude of the current supply problem. And to make a point here, in the recent Stocks and All Positions report, Mark, of a couple of short weeks ago, the USDA brought to our attention that corn stocks in the western part of the Corn Belt, dating back to the early 70s, were the third largest on farms, to include the era of the mid-80s, on record. The prospect of any significant basis improvement or flat price improvement as a function of that supply and the knowledge that the market has of that supply is very inhibitive. We're not likely to improve price substantially or talk about turnarounds until we dispose of some or much of this inventory, Mark. So the producer is obligated, first of all, to realize that, and then secondly, make plans accordingly. Not only for what's in hand, but as mentioned here earlier, what he or she intends to produce this coming season. So those rallies, and there'll be recovery, and I think when they do occur, the obligation will be, do I sell cash? Do I use put options? Do I forward contract and incorporate CRC, for example, to ensure those bushels, but have some type of strategy in hand. And at present, price prospects are not particularly bright, so make them realistic. So.
We want to remind our viewers out there that if they've been trying to call, keep trying. A little bit of a technical snafu, but your calls will eventually come through, so keep trying. 1-800-469-2788. And that caller had one follow-up question for Walt Hagen, and that is, are you buying these calves at the current market?
We are. That calf at 525 pounds grass flesh, emphasis, he needs to be a little bit on the medium to light order for flesh condition. With the current cost of production going to grass and the prospects of a hedge on that calf coming back in this next fall, there's at least $40 and up to $60 a head in a hedge on those calves. And we think it's the best buy in the market.
Okay, let's, I want to come back to, Virgil made a concern about guaranteeing yourself or reducing that risk or transferring that risk, and that's what Dennis Daggett is in the business of doing, transferring that risk. For producers out there for 1999, Dennis, transferring risk, what options are they going to have?
Well, Mark, right now there's a fairly decent amount of options. In the crop insurance world, we have the standard programs that we've had in the historical past of the multi-peril crop insurance that guarantees production out of the field on a percentage of your actual production history. You have crop hail insurance, which is a value-added program where you have dollars of coverage on an acre for the event of hail. But there are new programs out there, such as CRC, which is crop revenue coverage, that basically puts together a price and production formula that actually establishes a minimum dollar value of cover out there, and there are a variety even then of those products, and revenue assurance and income protection and the CRC program, and there's even in light of the low commodity prices right now, there's even additional private programs that are price enhancers out there that actually raise that price on the indemnity bushel if there is a loss out there. So there are a whole variety of programs out there available for the farmer on a risk management basis that the independent local agents that sell crop insurance can actually advise the farmer of his specific needs for his specific operation.
Are farmer attitudes improving towards crop insurance? Typically, if you want to get an argument going with somebody, you'd start talking about crop insurance. Is it better now, and why?
Well, I think it could possibly call it somewhat better now. We know that this coming year that there's going to be a lot more subsidy out there available through the disaster bill. There's a minimum guarantee of at least 30% more off the product out there. Could be even more depending on the end of the year. But there are a lot of farmers who still have the attitude out there that the coverages are too low and the prices are too high, and the crop insurance industry is working very hard to address that issue and to turn attitudes around and actually create crop insurance or make it into something that the farmer will actively look at as a risk management tool as he plans for future years. We want to make sure that ag loan portfolio is protected against a natural disaster, and that's how we should be used, and also as a baseline cover for his marketing program.
And if there was one institution or organization out there that really likes to see that crop revenue coverage, it would be the man to my immediate right, our banker here this evening. Hank, what do you tell lenders when it comes to some kind of crop protection or income guarantee?
In most cases, people should have it, and it may not be that the lender requests it. They just should have it for good business reasons. With as much money as we have invested in this crop today, it just makes good sense to cover some of the risk on it.
All right. Is it something you insist upon as a lender?
I'm going to say that's a case-by-case basis.
All right. Several calls have come in regarding the outlook for moving product this year, the transportation outlook and what's ahead. Shortage of rail cars again, problems like that. We're early in the cycle. John Roach, what are you hearing along those lines?
Well, the movement of grain has been very sluggish, and the transportation has not been really a very large issue. But Virgil brought up a very good point. There's lots and lots of inventory out there that's going to try to fit through the doorway at the same time, and we're bound to have problems with transportation when that occurs. So the outlook will be for another struggling period of time, but right at the moment, the inventory movement is relatively sluggish.
A question comes in from Osceola, Iowa. And I'll let this one go to Wayne and Virgil and Walt. Wayne, we'll start off with you. How can we expect better prices when everybody contracts with the packing house related particularly to livestock, Wayne?
That's a good question, and it's a tremendously complex issue. On one hand, we're asking the producers to guarantee a market, and the packers have been willing to do that through a variety of sources, and that always diminishes the free market and the competition, and these are really tough questions. The Cattlemen's Association, the NCBA, the LMA, and a whole host of other folks are struggling with this. And quite frankly, I'm a free market person. We ought to negotiate all these prices. We got a lot of other tools that we can use. But on the other hand, when you take one of those options away, it's like closing a sale barn. It's a loss of a market that's available to folks, and we need as many of those as we possibly can. But if there's a downside to the contracting and the grid programs, it's the fact that they all come back to the cash market for a basis, and we need to find some other way to establish that base price, because if you think about the cattle that are going into the grid, that's the high end of the quality, and yet the average price is whatever's left. And so when the basis, in my estimation, is much too low, and I'm sure the rest of the panel members have got some thoughts on this as well.
Well, let's find out. Walt, Hackney, what about that? We have so much cattle under some kind of a contract, both cattle and hogs. What impact does that have on the outlook for better prices?
I think, Mark, not to take exception, but I think the greater issue is the confusion among the masses of producers about contracting. There's such a diversity among contracts. You have floor price contracts that aren't really floors. They're debt accrual. And the producer, and in some cases, Hank, some of the lenders were misinformed about the security of a floor price contract. We found out that was a glass floor. You've got contracts where the cattle are physically committed to a packer with no price discovery period, as Wayne's referring. That's a packer's dream, to have that kind of an issue. He can price those cattle off of last week's average of his own cash buy, not any national average. That's no good for our industry. I think what Wayne, and I couldn't agree more, price discovery, as far as 99 goes, is going to be required to have a solid price on the product, where it will inherently come back with cost of production and a profit for that operation, or I think money is going to be hard to come by. So I'm a little different than Wayne, and maybe not, in that we feel there's a place for the right kind of a contract, Mark. A contract that guarantees me a price that I've fixed my own price discovery on through the vehicles that John Roche and Virgil offer me. I think that's good business. I think it's wrong, though, for the industry to pledge their product to a packer in a captive supply with no price discovery affixed to the product. I think that's foolish. And we have fought that as a company. We're suffering for it as a hog and beef industry as we speak, Mark.
All right, captive supply, Virgil. What are your thoughts?
Mark, I think there's a lot of confusion from the get-go regarding specific contracts that are currently available. And to hedge here and defer that question, I think, to sources better than I, in addition to Wayne and Walt's suggestions here, I think there have been studies at the University of Missouri, Iowa State, Nebraska, and perhaps others that have addressed that issue and that question and documented their answers. And I would suggest those viewers or those callers that are concerned and perhaps confused about this contracting issue seek those references. Mark, I would feel more comfortable deferring that question to those sources.
All right, Virgil, sidestep. It's all right. Dennis, the question for you now. Going back to crop insurance, you touched on this. The question from Story County is, how is the USDA going to implement the crop insurance program to make it more attractive to get producers and insurance companies to participate? Now, you talked about some enhancements, increased subsidies.
Yeah, that will happen this year, but you will find that crop insurance is going to be a political focal point here of Congress. It was the first time in the history of State of the Union addresses that it was specifically addressed. It was, the President has put forth to Congress right now the fact that they want crop insurance revamped. They are talking about anywhere between $1 to $2 billion being placed to the issue of reforming crop insurance. So it's going to be an interesting process to actually look at what is going to happen to crop insurance in the future, because there is a desire to improve the program, to create a solid safety net for the farmer. And the current crop insurance program, there are those who believe that it does not do that, especially in multi-year disasters, when you have one loss after another loss after another loss, that the current actual production history program does not actually support the safety net in such a way that will keep farmers farming. So there will be a lot of debate on that going forward. There is no lack of desire on the private sector to be involved in improving that program and making it work for the farmer on his behalf. But it needs to be a fundamental issue addressed, and that is, are you going to be working with a crop insurance program that has actuarial soundness to it, or are you going to have a crop insurance program that addresses actually some social needs out there? And that will be a part of the debate and a part of the things to watch in Congress this forthcoming year regarding crop insurance. But there will be a lot of work, I believe, in the very fundamental area of trying to get this program so it is attractive to the farmers and actually meets the needs out there. So there's a variety of ideas. Exactly what will come out of it, I wouldn't even venture a guess at this point.
Another question coming in now for Mr. Hackney, and based on his questions earlier, would you expand the cow herd now, Walt?
I suppose that it'll be the basic nature of the cattle industry to expand it, and in 4 years or 5 years we'll be going back into another cyclical overload. I don't know that we can stop that kind of activity. Personally, to answer your question, no. If it was my cow herd, if it was my choice, I would leave my cow herd alone. I would take the revenue created by the lesser amount of feeder cattle and the subsequent finished cattle. It's going to be the result, and I'd capitalize off of that end of it rather than try to capitalize off of producing more calves.
Well, let's move over to yet another area, and that's farmland values. And with pressure on commodity prices, John Roach, Minnesota caller says values have dropped 2% this quarter. Are we going to see a further drop in farmland demand and price?
Well, we may well see a further drop in the price, but the demand does not seem to be slacking at all. The 2% drop that's occurred in Minnesota probably doesn't erase the gain that occurred last year. The farmland continues to be well desired by people, and we may well just see, if the price slips much, we may well just see people refuse to make any sales. Farmland is in what I would say very strong hands.
Okay, let's make a follow-up to that and another impact. And this call from Illinois, and this is for you, Hank. And that is, what is justifiable cash rent? This is 130 to 170 bushel an acre ground, and in his area, it's running 175 to $200 an acre. Is that reasonable?
What's reasonable cash rent is what the operator that is renting the farm can afford to pay and work through his cash flow. So if his business is sound enough and his cost control is good enough and his production is high enough along with good marketing, he may very well be able to afford to pay those prices. On the other hand, if any one of those factors isn't in line, he may not be able to afford to pay those prices. So that's strictly a number that comes up out of each individual operation.
Follow-up, this is to Virgil and John in particular. Call from Plymouth County. Recently told by a large packer that in 5 to 10 years the Chicago Mercantile Exchange would not be in existence, I'm assuming in terms of trading livestock futures. CME hog contracts would not be traded. Is this something that's a buzz in the industry we just haven't heard much about, John?
I haven't heard much about it. The contract was modified to a lean hog contract to better fit the actual marketings that the producers are utilizing. But we do have one problem, and that is that the very large operations, by and large, don't hedge. They basically market their inventory over a period of so much inventory per week, and they think that that is their hedge to get average prices and to work over on the cost side of it. Now, some of those people are going to be rethinking that position after watching the kind of losses they experienced in 1998. But at least at this juncture, we're actually enjoying very good trading volume on the Mercantile Exchange trading livestock futures.
Virgil, anything on that?
Was it the entire exchange or the lean hog futures contract specifically?
Well, it kind of said the entire exchange.
No, I don't think there's any threat the entire exchange will be extinct in 10 years.
Mark, as a matter of fact, they've just added a pork product contract to the Mercantile Exchange, so you can deal directly with the end user through that program. So it looks to me like the program's alive and well, and don't count on it getting out of your life anytime soon.
Wayne, a follow-up, and John, a follow-up for you. Sorry, John, go ahead. You had a follow-up on that?
Well, there is quite a bit of concern about how are we going to trade on the exchanges. Are we going to trade via computer, or are we going to trade via open outcry? Mm-hmm. And that definitely has been a hot topic, and the value of the exchange seats or the memberships to both the Chicago Board of Trade and Mercantile Exchange have plummeted out of fear that the business could well move toward a computer matching type of trade rather than open outcry.
Okay. Off-exchange derivatives and things like that, too, I'm sure are probably playing a part in this as well, into this question. Follow-up, Wayne, for you. You're going to get into this grain merchandising business with your ethanol plant. Caller wants the entire panel to discuss the Continental-Cargill merger. How do you view it? What does it mean for producers?
Well, I really think that we need as many markets as we can possibly sustain. There's been a merger mania in the agribusiness side, and that's got to be a concern, and I think our legislators need to watch that, and our Secretary of Commerce needs to watch those kind of things. Obviously, it's a free country, it's a capitalistic country, and people are buying capital and that sort of thing. So I really think that's a problem that our lawmakers need to watch. I'm not going to suggest that that's a good or a bad merger, but whenever they merge companies, we lose a little piece of competition, and that makes it unhealthy. Mark, I want to follow up on something I think I detected from John's comment regarding soybeans, and if I detected a little bit of bullishness in his thought about the future of the soybean market, there's a 40-cent LDP available in beans right now. And to your viewers who still have that bean out there, they certainly ought to look at LDP and part of those beans based on this 40-cent LDP.
John, I want to mention that LDP, good opportunity to take advantage of that now?
I think there is. There's very little carry in the market on soybeans. There's also a good basis in most areas. If you have not yet taken out the loan or capitalized on the LDP, if the market goes up 10 cents a bushel, you don't gain anything at all, because what you gain in the market, you lose in your government payment. So you're much better off to take the LDP on an up day in the beans, sell the beans on the strength, and then if you want to own them, come back and re-own a summer call option because you can own it for about what your interest plus storage cost is on the soybeans. So to me, there's a very easy and a very wise time to exchange one form of ownership to another form of ownership that has reduced cost and reduced risk involved.
Wayne, ditto?
You bet.
Okay. Virgil?
Same context. Well, I would just add in that same context, this fall there was an awfully lot of LDP exercised in both corn and beans. And again, once that's done, those stocks are basically free. There is no loan program. So those inventories must be marketed, Mark. And again, we're talking about a situation where the Southern Hemisphere's crop is most likely going to grow larger, and we'll get an indication of that on the 10th of February in the next USDA report. Exports, domestic utilization, lagging projections, so it's likely that the carryout this year will grow larger. It's important that our producers realize that, and the LDP opportunity is a good one under current circumstances, but be advised on any kind of price improvement here in the immediate future, marketing opportunities, I think, are present under those circumstances.
All right, good points. We've had several questions called in related to sheep and sheep marketing, and I get to ask that question a lot. Why don't you talk about sheep on market to market? Because we don't have a futures exchange that is national that we can discuss specifically each week on market to market. We seldom have a chance really to talk about the sheep market because the show's on in almost 30 states. It's hard for us to discuss a market that is more of a cash market than anything else. We are fortunate to have quite a sheep man with us, and that's Walt Hackney. And Walt, the question was flagged to you from Dubuque County. What do you see ahead for the sheep industry the next 5 years?
I think if the sheep industry does the inventory control job they've done for 3.5 straight years, that's the only predictable ROI positive red meat industry we seem to have at this time. The sheep industry has done a phenomenal job marketing their product. We feel in hogs and cattle that we're limited on packer competition. You should raise sheep if you want to see a real reduction in packer competition, yet through inventory control, the growers have maintained a phenomenal ROI in sheep. If I personally were to advise a young producer wanting to get into livestock agriculture today, I'm sure part of my suggestion would be to step into some ewe production as part of his portfolio. One of the things that we may lose is a government subsidy on the wools. That wouldn't be the worst thing in the world because the wool in regard, particularly the long crimp wool, has become a luxury item due to some of the common garment and so forth made out of cotton. So the wool industry is creating another total market for that sheep grower.
All right, Virgil?
Mark, I would just add something here. It just came to my mind. It's probably of interest to several of our viewers. The red meat production forecast for '99, red meat production is forecast to decline about 3.5% in '99 versus '98. However, poultry production is forecast to increase about 5.5%. So the net effect of that, the combined totals, at least as projected for '99, are every bit as large as they were in '98, which was a record large year of production. So I gathered here through the earlier conversation some guarded optimism regarding price prospects for the live cattle market as well as the hog market, and I too share that to some extent. But I think it needs to be noted here that total edible protein supplies are forecast in '99 to be every bit as large as they were in 1998. So the need, again, and the emphasis here of market planning, market plans, market strategies, I think is brought to our attention by that in particular.
All right, all these comments tend to go with our next question, which comes from Crawford County. And Hank, I'm going to start with you, and then I want Wayne and Dennis to comment on it as well. What help is out there for young farmers? For a long time, the state of Iowa, we've had a beginning farmer loan program. We've had other programs out there to get young people started. What's available out there for those young farmers who have begun farming, who are going to be certainly hit by the problems we had in 1998 going into 99. What's out there? Hank?
This is a question that hasn't only been asked just in 98 going into 99, but maybe for the last 10 years. How do we get young people involved in agriculture? How does a young guy get started in agriculture? We're all familiar with the scenarios that he needs to have a family operation to step into. He needs to have family to support him. But there are some opportunities to allow people to work into agriculture starting on a part-time basis and working into it on a full-time basis. A lot of this depends upon the area where they're in. You get into southern Iowa as an example, there are opportunities for people to, young people to perhaps go into a cow-calf operation on a 50-50 basis with somebody, have some off-farm income to help supplement the living until they get an operation established. It's nothing that anybody's going to make a lot of money any one year on, so that you can start part-time this year and be full-time next year. But and I'm not talking just a cow-calf thing, I'm talking about agriculture in general. You get into the crop areas, you've got, you can start out as a custom farming operation, lease some machinery, do some custom harvesting, some custom planting, and build some equity base and grow this thing. Agriculture is like every other business. You've got to have some equity to get into it. You've got to build your production history. You've got to be able to manage the business, and you need to demonstrate that on a small scale before you get into it to a big scale. So you're asking me, are there opportunities? Yes. Where are they at depends on the area that you're in and what you want to do.
Wayne, you've talked about this too, the importance of bringing young people into the business. What are you telling me, Stacey?
Well, Mark, I was just at the Appanoose Livestock, and Clarence told me that he'd liquidated several cow herds from older folks that have gotten old and tired and have now retired from the cows. I talked to John Shaban last week, and I think there was 24 or 5 cow herds that have been liquidated out in western Iowa. This is really an issue that the whole state needs to be concerned about, but quite frankly, if profits come back to agriculture, the young folks will be there. There's people who want to farm. It's just a matter of making it profitable. They'll be there. There are folks that are, I'd call them displaced farmers, that if the potential was there to make 6-figure incomes, there'd be plenty of folks to farm that. Now, to the young fellow who's graduating from college and going back and joining the family farm operation, they need to associate themselves with the likes of the folks around this panel who really care about farmers succeeding. The program that Dennis offers and the kind of programs that are available here through risk managers such as the members of this panel, marketing clubs. Lots been said about revising the barn raising idea and the threshing ring and find ways to solve problems cooperatively. I think we got to give up a little of our independence, and we'll deal with this subject to help young fellows. They all don't need to own $180,000 combines. They can put those programs together and find ways to do it. So I think there's a lot of ways that we can address these problems, but obviously they got to have to want to, and profits is the easy answer.
Question really for all of you. I'm going to start with you, Dennis, and the question comes from Union County. Does anyone on the panel believe that since implementation of Freedom to Farm, that anything but a crop or weather-related crop disaster will bring an improvement in commodity prices? Dennis, this crop disasters are your area.
Well, just from our perspective, basically the thing that we see probably more than anything else is that the only thing that will reduce the actual production out there is a natural disaster of some type of weather event that will reduce production, and that will only influence price as if we're the world leader in that arena. For example, this past year in cotton, you took West Texas out of there was very little cotton raised in West Texas. You get the reduced value of cotton or reduced production of cotton out of California, and yet you didn't see a real major impact on price. But from our perspective, if we're looking at something to actually increase price in the market system, it'll have to be a reduction of supply. The only thing that we would offer in there is, again, the ability to put a minimum dollar value out there with the crop revenue coverage program.
John Roach, what about that? We're not going to see the government set-asides and so forth down the road. We are pretty much left to the weather and international trade, aren't we?
Well, there's even another specter that we have to be concerned about too, and that is the technology that's developing is really starting to be carried across greater and greater numbers of acres here and around the world. You know, a lot of people talk about what happened to the pork industry, but really, if you just go back a few years, we used to see 13, 14, 15 pigs per sow per year. Technology now allows people to have 23, 24 pigs per sow per year. And it's that technology improvement that really got the hog industry into the kind of troubles it got itself into. And quite frankly, we saw some yields this year in grain in some areas that were absolutely phenomenal. And so one of the things that we're dealing with is not just the freedom to farm as being a problem, it's that we're putting a lot of research money into all the different aspects of crop production, and that brings new technology, and we quickly move it around the world, and the demand doesn't necessarily grow at the same pace our capability to produce grows. And that's the problem we're in right now. If you remember, it was just in 1995 when people were saying in 96 that, well, we just couldn't raise enough to satisfy this level of demand, and surprise, surprise, we brought enough new technology on stream within that period of time that with almost marginal kind of weather, we push our yields up and our crops to where they're record levels or near record levels. And so we're in that time frame when the demand is not racing upwards as fast as our capability to produce is. So this isn't the freedom to farm. This is just technology coming to bear. And that's one of the reasons that the producers are going to have to re-look at their marketing, because we've seen this happen in the past. And when that happens, the marketing has had to change, and the approach to marketing has had to change, or else producers that didn't make those changes, unless they have a lot of equity, they're not producers anymore.
Good point. Virgil, as we look ahead here, what John says is so true. The question has come in tonight, I'm sure 100 times, why do we overproduce? Part of it is demand for what's a perception of demand anyway.
Aggregate demand, or the demand curve prior to the Southeastern Asian problem, was clearly on the incline. And had the Asian crisis and all of the ramifications thereof not occurred, we probably would have not gone through this swoon, or to this extent, Mark. Now, I happen to believe in financial cycles, and I think we are close or approaching the bottom of a financial cycle as measured by the Southeastern Asian communities, with Japan being the linchpin to that group. I think Japan will slowly come online. Now, that being stated, just the perception of that has the ability of changing the perspective of a marketplace. And I think there'll be a change, Mark. But again, the emphasis tonight probably points more towards effective planning, marketing strategy, encompassing all of the associated services this panel represents, more so than at any other time. So to answer that question, or to try to answer that question, prior to the Southeastern Asian problem, the aggregate demand curve was clearly on the incline, and I think that will again resume. How quickly, I cannot answer that question.
We only have about 30 seconds left, and another question that has come in repeatedly, and that is the question that I've heard since I was on my grandfather's day, and that question remains, why is the farmer's share so small to the food dollar? And Wayne, we've got about 30 seconds for you to answer that for us all.
That's really why we're doing what we're doing with the ethanol program, Mark. We've just got to add more value to it so that we can share in more of that dollar downstream. I think that's true of so many things. The bean crushing, what's going on with some of the niche markets in livestock, and we've just got to own that product longer.
Adding value is something I know many members of this panel have talked about. I know you have, Wayne, and our lenders and bankers, and I guess Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have. But Walt, Virgil, Dennis, thank you. Hank, and Wayne and John, thank you all very much. That'll wrap up this special session of Market to Market. We hope we've been of help for continuing coverage, of course, of agriculture and other issues that matter to rural Americans. Join us each week for Market to Market, Friday evenings at 8 o'clock and Sunday afternoons in Iowa at 1 o'clock, right here on Iowa Public Television. Until then, again, for our panel, I'm Mark Pearson. Thanks for watching. Have a great week.
This program is not a news broadcast. Rick Nelson gave his final concert on December 30th, 1985. The next day, his DC-3 mysteriously crashed in a Texas field. Immediately, the rumors began.
It's like somebody jumping up and down on your brother's bones.
Now, for the first time, an investigation reveals the truth behind the rumors, the real story of what happened. Also, in a New Mexico motorcycle park, it was a day like any other until a tragedy occurred. Now, it's up to scientists to rebuild the accident inside the computer in order to find out what happened.
You know, when something goes wrong, most of us just ask what happened. But for the scientists and engineers of Failure Analysis Associates, their job is to find out what happened. They're like high-tech detectives, but instead of carrying a badge and a gun, they use some incredible scientific equipment to solve their cases. When they put the puzzle together, future accidents are prevented, lives are saved, or in the case of Rick Nelson, a man's reputation is restored.
Went to a garden party, reminisced my old friend.
To millions during the 1940s and 50s, Ozzie Nelson, his wife Harriet, and their children were America's real first family. After making the jump from radio to television during the 1950s, little Rick Nelson became America's favorite son. Rick played himself on the Ozzie and Harriet show, and for a while, the Nelsons were everybody's next-door neighbors.
There were a lot of other shows like ours on the air, but there were none that I can recollect that used their own names and portrayed what in essence was their lifestyle.
Rick made the jump from child actor to rock and roll star in 1957, and his career took off. As he got older, he got wiser, and many say better, but he never lost his innocence and feelings toward his family.
We loved and respected each other, and he had a great sense of humor, and he was very easy. He loved kids. He loved his own kids very much.
Learn my lesson well. You see, you can't please everyone, so you got to please yourself.
Rick Nelson was a true American hero until the last afternoon of 1985. On that day, Rick, his fiancée, and the 6 members of his Stone Canyon band died when their DC-3 crash-landed into a Texas field. Then the rumors began.
One network national newsman came to my club, and he asked my opinion of the freebasing, and I said it's absurd. And that was the end of the interview. And it's like, how unfair can you be?
Well, it wasn't so much his reputation as tarnished. It's like somebody jumping up and down on your brother's bones. And you just, you want to go find a machine gun someplace, but you don't know quite where to aim it at. You know, I mean, he's left his children who won't have a father to grow up with. I've lost a brother, somebody that was a piece of me, really.
Rick Nelson's reputation was tarnished. Though the fire was intense, a number of aerosol cans, much like these, were found in the wreckage. Now, aerosol cans can be used during the freebasing process to provide the fire needed to vaporize cocaine. And some journalists jumped to the conclusion that this was the real cause of the crash.
The events that led to tragedy began on December 28, 1985. On that afternoon, Rick and his band flew into the small town of Gunthorsville, Alabama, as a favor to an old friend and former band member, Pat Upton.
Hey, how are you?
Rick had just bought his vintage DC-3, and he loved to show it off.
Hey. Oh, man, this looks beautiful. This is great.
It was a late afternoon, and the sun was setting, and all the colors and everything behind the plane looked very nice. And so when I saw him, I mentioned, you know, that to him, and he was proud of his plane.
DC-3s require constant maintenance, and after landing, pilot Brad Rank and co-pilot Ken Ferguson checked over one of the plane's engines.
Usually once he got to the city or the hotel, he usually stayed in his room, and wouldn't see him again till he came to do the show. But the next day they came to my home and visited for an hour or so, and that was very special.
Hi, nice to meet you. Yeah, sure, you bet. To our humble abode. All right.
My kids, they were excited to have him come visit, and he autographed a picture for the kids, which they enjoyed, saying "my friend," Rick to my friend, and that's very special to them.
Rick Nelson gave the last concert of his life on the night of December 30th, 1985. Pat Upton captured this never-before-seen footage of the show on his home video camera.
The people went nuts. They loved it, and as he was leaving, he turned around and waved, you know. And it was the greatest thing, the biggest thing to happen to Guntersville, Alabama.
The next morning, Rick and his band were scheduled to fly to Dallas for a sold-out New Year's show. When they arrived at the airstrip, they were disappointed to find that heavy fog had covered the area.
You don't get this plane going pretty quick.
In addition, the plane's engine was still being worked on. Finally, at 1 p.m., the DC-3 was ready.
Thanks for the pictures to the kids. Okay. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Hey, see you next time. Bye-bye.
He always had a fear of flying, ever since he was little.
Rock and roll, yeah!
As a matter of fact, I know he went to a hypnotist, and they hypnotize you and give a post-hypnotic suggestion or something where you're supposed to be able to fly. And I think it worked a couple of times. And but he flew so much later on in his life that I think he got used to flying.
They had the plane, they made a final wave goodbye, you know, and they were gone.
My wife and I were standing in the kitchen, and I think she was on the phone, and we have a little television in the kitchen area, and a news broadcast came on, and I half heard it, and it said something about Rick Nelson, and I thought it was a promo for something, and I didn't really pay that much attention. Then they came on again, and I did hear this one. It said that Rick Nelson is reported to have gone down in a plane, and I was in complete shock.
I couldn't believe it. I just couldn't believe it. Aside from the obvious,
When we return, we're going to reconstruct the events that led to a tragedy. Events that for the first time will show what really happened to an American hero.
What happened? We'll be right back.
Can't get enough of the Emmy Award-winning trauma? TLC brings you a new breakthrough adrenaline rush series, Paramedics.
Trauma alert coming your way.
Paramedics. Don't miss it. Fridays at 8 on TLC. Adventures for your mind.
is built in November and melts in April, 100 miles above the Arctic Circle. Sweden's Ice Hotel proves that winter can be tamed, controlled, rather enjoyed. A realization some guests arrive at before they arrive. The all-wheel drive Volvo Cross Country.
Dandruff, psoriasis, scalp dermatitis. If you asked all the dermatologists listed here to recommend a therapeutic shampoo, Neutrogena T-Gel would come out #1. T-Gel works on all 3 itchy, flaky scalp conditions. Neutrogena T-Gel, it works.
Well, I guess I snapped. What did you do? Well, there was a pair of scissors. You didn't. I did. Snip, snip. No, anything left? Just tiny little pieces. You did the right thing.
And thank you for switching to Discover Platinum.
Expect more from your credit card. Introducing Discover Platinum. With a new low rate and a cashback bonus award, it pays to discover. Platinum. Call 1-800-DISCOVER.
Got another snipper.
I've meditated for 3 months.
Yes, Master.
What have you learned?
Nobody in the world sells more real estate than RE/MAX.
RE/MAX helped us find this place, you know.
Cool.
RE/MAX, the real estate leaders. Before you choose a vacation, ask yourself some questions.
Ireland. 8-day motor coach tour including airfare and accommodation, $1,294. Contact your travel agent, or for a free vacation kit, call 1-800-SHAMROCK or visit our website at www.shamrock.org. Ireland, awaken to a different world.
Sunday, supercharged, nitro burning. That's all they can do to keep them on the ground.
Push, push, push all the time.
Now, meet the drivers, hear their stories.
My style has been described as aggressive.
See how they keep their engines purring and experience the consequences when things go terribly wrong. Super Racers, Sunday starting at 9 on TLC. Adventures for your mind.
As a TCI digital cable customer, you have more choices than ever because we just added more channels for you to watch at no extra charge. Like the Golf Channel, with golf 24 hours a day, and Speed Vision, devoted exclusively to cars, boats, planes, and motorcycles. TCI digital cable, now even more of what you want.
Air, water, fire, the elements that comprise the artist palette. A palette on which is created high-quality, handcrafted, one-of-a-kind, and limited edition metal jewelry. We are Elements Limited, a unique gallery where function and art merge, where vision and precious materials meet, and beauty is the result. Original pieces and those hand-selected from studios across the country. Elements Limited, not for everyone, quite possibly for you. Elements Limited in the shops at Roosevelt.
Rick Nelson and his Stone Canyon Band had played their final concert. Rick's family, as well as millions of his fans, were stunned and saddened by his death. For them, the continuing rumors of freebasing only added insult to injury.
In 1989, investigator Don Likens began to look into the events leading to the crash. When he examined the testimony of the flight crew, he became curious about an apparent malfunction of the plane's heater minutes before the DC-3 caught on fire.
I can't give you a very precise time as to the first incident of receiving an overheat light on the heater, but let's just say 45 minutes into the flight, I got an overheat light on the panel in front of me indicating that the main heater was overheating, and I turned the heater off.
I'm not very comfortable with that. Why don't you go ahead and take the airplane and I'll go back and take a peek at it. I got the aircraft.
At that time, Mr. Rank indicated to me that he was going to go back into the tail section of the aircraft and take a look at the heater and see if he could see anything obvious, figure out why we were getting this overheat warning.
I'm freezing. Huh? Are you cold?
Yeah, it got cold here all of a
It's
sudden.
freezing. We need a little heat back here.
Is it the sun?
At some point, Brad came forward and asked me what had happened when I turned the heater on again, and I said I didn't turn it on.
Turn it back on.
He said, well, Rick wants heat, and he reached to the panel where the switch was and turned the heater back on.
15 minutes after the heater was turned on, a serious problem developed.
You guys smell anything?
The bassist of our group came forward and tapped me on the shoulder and said, Ferg, we've got smoke back here.
Hey guys, hey, there's smoke in here! Listen to me, listen to me. This is fresh air vents. Try to stay calm, I'll take care of it, okay? Get up near the fresh air vents. That's not doing any good.
1-1 Yankee to Texarkana. I'd like to turn this thing around. We've got a serious problem up here.
1-1 Yankee, can you make it back to Texarkana?
Negative. We've got to get this thing on the ground now.
If you've ever seen an automobile burning on the freeway that's been hit and its fuel tank is ruptured and the car is burning, that's the kind of thick smoke that was filling the cabin of the aircraft.
Fire extinguisher! Ferg, we need some help back here, man! You're down. 1-1 Yankee, how do you hear us? We're approximately 17 miles to the north of Mount Pleasant. We're declaring an emergency. Mayday, mayday, we're going in.
And at that point, we started a maximum emergency descent.
I gotta clear the smoke somehow.
Pilot Brad Rank had to make a life or death choice. He needed to see the ground to land, but he knew if he opened his window, he would risk fanning the flames. He made his decision.
I'm gonna pop my window.
Opening window created a tremendous draft. When I opened mine, it drew flames up around my seat and up around my body. However, there weren't any options.
Mayday, mayday, Texarkana, 1-1 Yankee. Brace yourself.
Looked back at the cabin, and through the cabin windows was just flames. And I remember thinking, no screams, please don't let me hear any screams. I don't know, maybe I was already going into shock, maybe I was a little numb. All I could think of was my friends are dead. It was a situation that was without right answers. There wasn't a correct thing to do that would have made it all right. That would have saved their lives or would have prevented what happened.
It would take until the next morning for the wreckage to cool enough to allow anyone inside the plane. Rick Nelson's body was found in the rear. It appeared he had tried to shield his fiancée from the flames. Sadly, this last heroic act would not be widely reported. Several years passed. Fire engineer Norm Alvarez joined the investigation, working with failure analysis and Don Likens in order to determine the real cause of the crash.
I didn't consciously go in to prove or disprove anything. I consciously went in to attempt to find out as best possible what caused the fire.
In order to determine the real location of the fire, the men tried an experiment.
We found a duplicate aircraft so that we could get into our investigation into a real live aircraft with the equipment still on board.
By igniting smoke bombs in a variety of locations inside the DC-3, they tried to duplicate the way that the smoke had spread. In test after test, the smoke was studied. The men hoped that the direction of this smoke would point to the real cause of the fire on board Rick Nelson's plane. Finally, after studying the data, Alvarez developed a theory about what had happened, a theory that centered upon the pilot's efforts to turn on the heater.
Given that we had a condition where the pilot was continually overriding the safety systems of the heater, that's what I think started the fire. I believe that if this heater had not been mismanaged, if the pilot had heeded these warning systems that were built into it, that this accident wouldn't have happened.
But Don Likens had some unanswered questions.
One of the mysteries of this thing that was never really resolved is as Rick Nelson's airplane was coming down in the last few seconds of its life, it was trailing fire, and it was also dropping particles in such quantities that it was setting fields on fire.
What could have caused such intense heat? Likens believes that some burn marks found on the plane's tail could have been caused by a fire that began near the plane's wing, not inside the cabin. For this and other reasons, Likens believes that freebasing is simply out of the question.
It's so ridiculous because at the time that the freebasing would have had to occur, the fire starting, he had one of the survivors literally standing within feet of him. That's absurd. That the captain, who was in the back, verified in the back, standing in that area, would not merely have put a fire extinguisher on it and put it out.
Likens soon found an explanation for what he believed had fueled the fire, and that answer was 40 years old.
Most of the 35,000 DC-3s built in the 1940s were made out of aluminum. It's light, inexpensive, and durable. It also won't easily catch on fire. But during World War II, when Nelson's plane was built, there were shortages of aluminum. As a substitute, parts of some planes were built out of magnesium. It too is light, inexpensive, and durable, but it reacts very differently to fire.
Don Likens believes that a fire could have started in one of the plane's engines and then, fueled by magnesium, quickly spread from the wing into the cabin. But no matter where the fire began, investigators are certain of one thing. The source of ignition was not where Rick Nelson was sitting. The aerosol cans found in the wreckage could have been used for any number of reasons, none having to do with freebasing.
I am confident that he was not freebasing. I'm confident that this had nothing to do with a fire inside the cabin.
I do feel very satisfied that we have straightened out a wrong. And he's a teenage idol, and he shouldn't carry that burden, not an unfair burden, and that's an unfair burden.
He lived the way he wanted to and did the things that made him happy. I think if there's any message in that is that we should all, you know, give 100% and spend as much good time with the people that we love while we can.
The results of the work conducted by investigators Likens and Alvarez completely cleared Ricky and his flight crew of any wrongdoing. The freebase theory was totally dismissed. But it's been 7 years since his death, and still the rumors continue. Now that we know what really happened, we can only hope that Rick Nelson will be fondly remembered as the son of Ozzie and Harriet, the brother of Dave, and one of America's favorite stars. Sometimes finding out what happened involves actually reconstructing the accident based on eyewitness accounts and evidence at the scene. But what if there are no witnesses? And the only scrap of evidence is a single photo taken after the accident.
Failure Analysis Associates recently used a scientific technique called photogrammetry to reconstruct the tragic events of an accident that left one young man paralyzed and another grief-stricken. It was a warm summer afternoon in 1988. At a New Mexico motorcycle park, a group of friends were enjoying their dirt bikes, ATVs, and the chance to be outdoors.
All right, I'll be back in a little bit. Get them burgers ready.
A young man whom we will call Stephen Weston left for one final ride on his ATV before sitting down to a barbecue dinner. At the same time, a teenage motorcycle rider, Richard Proctor, was eager to practice jumping over a small hill. What Richard didn't know was that Stephen was heading for the same hill from the opposite direction. In one terrifying moment, it was over. Stephen's neck had been broken. He was paralyzed. Though Though uninjured, Richard was filled with guilt. Could he have done anything different? Would a warning flag on the rear of the ATV have given him enough time to react? These questions were placed before a jury. That's when the scientific detectives from failure analysis were called in. But by the time they arrived at the site, 5 years had passed, and the accident scene had changed. The hill was no longer there. The detectives had only a few clues to work with. One of them, this picture taken at the time of the accident. And it was this picture that allowed them to travel back in time and rebuild the landscape. After doing some simple surveying, the investigators entered the data along with the photo into a computer and managed to recreate a three-dimensional model of exactly what the riders saw. From this model, Richard and the jury would finally be able to answer the question that had so troubled them. Could he have done something differently to avoid the accident? You be the judge. This is what Richard saw. Let's see it again. At last, Richard could be relieved of his burden. The computer had confirmed what he hoped was true. No matter what he had done, at the speed he was traveling, he had less than a second to react. Richard could not have swerved to avoid the accident.
The scientists of failure analysis presented their animation to the court. The jury agreed that the motorcyclist did not have enough time to react, and that even a warning flag on the ATV would have made no difference.
Once again, the Subaru Forester has outperformed the competition, earning the highest overall rating of vehicles tested in its class in a recent crash test. But the real beauty of the Forester is that it can help you avoid accidents altogether by automatically transferring power from the wheels that slip to the wheels that grip for maximum control. Another reason why the competition is a little bent out of shape. Subaru Forester, the beauty of all-wheel drive.
Some came to hide out, others to write. Some fled conformity. Some came for the weekend and never went home. The Florida Keys and Key West.
We process oranges and cocoa in Brazil. Blend and distribute animal feeds on 5 continents. Export North American grain to hungry markets around the world. And produce fertilizers in Saskatchewan and Florida, where our neighbors are flocking to their new home. Cargill. It's not just what we do, it's how we do it.
IRA investing can be simple. Start with people who speak plain English. People who know what a Roth IRA is. People who can help you choose the right IRA. You'll want strong performance. You'll want strong service. And no extra IRA fees. IRAs can be simple. Invest $2,000 in a strong IRA by February 28th, and we'll waive IRA fees for life. Call 1-888-2-STRONG.
Beginning Monday on TLC, behind the beauty of nature lies a beast. Fires rage, waters churn, and the earth moves. Stand in harm's way and witness the devastating power of the elements. Earth's Fury Week, beginning Monday at 8 with Super Fires, only on TLC. Adventures for your mind.
The following program contains recreations of the documented events and incorporates footage from those same events. This program is not a news broadcast. Tonight on What Happened, we'll sit in the cockpit and watch the agonizing last moments of World Airways Flight 30.
80 knots, no braking.
What caused this jumbo jet to skid off the end of a runway? Also,
We got a problem in here.
a huge gun turret explodes on a Navy battleship, and a young sailor is blamed. Only a new investigation can clear his name and answer the question, what happened?
Hello, I'm Ken Howard. Even the most fearless airline traveler has taken a firm grip on the arms of one of these. Certainly that was the case for the passengers aboard a plane that careened off the runway into an icy Boston harbor in the winter of 1982. It was essential to find out what happened so it would not happen again. And that's when failure analysis was called in.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Captain Langley. I'd like to welcome you on board. This next section.
After it was all over, every detail of the flight would become significant. But before, it was just another 45-minute hop from Newark, New Jersey to Boston. A flight that had been seriously delayed due to a violent winter storm.
Looks good.
To the flight crew, Captain Peter Langley and co-pilot Don Hertzfeld, their main concern was the condition of the icy runway that was waiting for them at Logan Airport in Boston. To Walter Metcalf and his son Leo, the trip marked their return from a vacation in Florida. To passenger Warren Adler, the plane had taken him from the sun of California to the heart of a winter blizzard. And to stewardess Lisa Jorgensen, the flight marked the end to a long working day. At 7 p.m., World Flight 30 began its final approach.
We've been cleared to land. Flight attendants, please take your seats.
Dad, what's happening? Wake up, we're landing. Put your seat on.
Wind is 180 at 3. World 30 heavy. Cleared to land. Runway 15 right. Wind 180 at 3. 500. 400. 300.
200, landing lights.
100. 50. 30.
Boy, slick.
We rolled out and we kept going and we kept going. And I realized we're going awful fast.
There was not that feeling of deceleration that is normal on a landing. This isn't normal.
120 knots.
No braking.
We're not stopping. We're not stopping.
80 knots, no braking. We're going off the end.
Boston down. Oh, 30 is going off the end.
It was a very loud bang. Everything went pitch black, and I felt like I'd been slammed into a cement wall of water.
To avoid colliding with the runway lights, Peter Langley steered the jumbo jet off the left side of the runway into the icy waters of Boston Harbor.